This morning I'm going to share with you some of the points I've discussed in my lecture at the Renmin University a couple of days back. It was a 3-hour lecture, of course many things were said, and it's not possible for me to recapitulate everything. And also what I'm going to say are not very necessarily organized, fairly at random, but also because of time I'm going to be very brief. So I'll just touch on a few points that maybe I feel can be useful for you as practitioner. That's mainly from that point of view. Of course, this is still a continuation of the discussion on karma. Now, I discussed firstly on in my lecture there, firstly on some development in the Abhidharma period. Last week, we talked about the Buddha's own teaching of karma, and we saw that among various things emphasized by the Buddha, one was as indicated in a very important sutta called the Nona-Pala Sutta. Remember the sutta because that actually came to influence the development of the karma theory, not only in the Theravada, in the Abhidharma time, but also we find very clear evidence of the influence of this sutta, of the teaching of the Buddha, in the northern tradition, in the Abhidharma, in the Mahavibhasha. The Zoroastrian tradition quotes it and refers to it several times as scriptural support, scriptural basis for some of the things they said on this doctrine in terms of development. So that is very important because actually you can see that you will remember that there are many inspiring instructions in the sutta. One point is clear that the Buddha's teaching of kamma is not mechanical, and it is not extreme views of fatalism or determinism, and it gives a hope. That it is, among other things, certainly it doesn't mean that if you have done something, then nothing else, there's nothing else you can do to escape the effect of it, and you're doomed. If you have done something unskillful, you're doomed to be trapped in the cycle of dukkha. You can be liberated, there are many ways, and even the unskillful action, the effect can be counteracted, it can be transcended. That is a strong message, and that is one aspect that very distinctively differentiates the Buddha's teaching of karma from other teachings in ancient India. In my lecture a couple of days back, because that is the second lecture in my series there, I started talking about the classifications in both the Pali tradition as well as in the northern tradition. Regarding the Pali tradition, we find that in fact, compared to the northern tradition, perhaps the doctrinal development is really not so much, for various reasons. One is also for the good reason that the Theravada tradition tries to be conservative in the positive sense and not to deviate too much, not to speculate too much, deviating from the Buddha's own teaching. So we don't find that much of doctrinal elaborations, but we certainly find various elaborations, and then of course when we look at these various classifications, when we look at these classifications, we can also see that they have systematized the Buddha's teaching, and much of it seems to have been inspired by that Nona-Pala Sutta, as I've said. one or two things. I'm not speaking out of my notes, of course. About the classification, some are of quite they're of considerable importance for us. For instance, the Pali commentary and Abhidhamma traditions speaks of different types of kamma in terms of the order of ripening. So some kamma can come out earlier than other kammas. So you do many good one, bad one, in this way, in that way, and to varying degrees. And but whether a particular karma ripens at a particular time because of various conditions. One thing, of course, it depends on the assemblage of conditions. The other thing is also depend on the very nature of the action itself. For instance, there is a classification which speaks of the first order of, you might say, of the ripening of karma, and that is what is called the heavy karma, the karuka karma. So if you do something which is of that nature, that karma is most likely to ripen first. So, for example, a simple example is let's say the 5 so-called great evil, or great so-called sin. That's not a very good word for Buddhism, but describe that is of a very serious nature. You know those, like killing one's father, killing one's mother, and splitting the sangha, and killing Arahan, and humming, causing bleeding, humming of the Buddha. So these are very, very serious transgressions, moral transgressions, and they are very heavy in nature. So when it is committed, then in the absence of other counteracting effects, this is bound to ripen first. Even if you have done other karmas, other good karmas, this will. But when you die, you will be reborn in hell. So in that sense, it is heavy. So we should learn to be aware of what are most serious, not in terms of transgressing anybody in Buddhism, against the Buddha or the teachers or the tradition, but in terms of its consequence. So that is why to practice Buddhism, we must understand Buddhism, we must understand the doctrines. We can get our guidelines in the Buddha's teaching. Then another type of karma is called asana karma. Asana means near, actually. And this refers to karma that is done just before someone passes away. That can be very useful. That is the understanding that the consciousness is very focused at the time of our death, and that our volition at that time is extremely influential on the cause of our rebirth. And particularly in the Theravada tradition, there is no belief of an antarbhava, that is intermediate existence. In their teaching, when somebody passes away, immediately he is reborn as another being in one form or another. There is no intermediate period of existence. That is called antara bhava. So Theravada officially does not teach in this way, and it is the situation is compared to is used is illustrated with the simile of a balance. You know, a balance, when one side falls down or goes down, the other side rises up immediately. There are two sides of balance. But this is in contrast to many traditions in Northern Buddhism, and particularly, for instance, in the Sarvastivada, it is believed that, and also generally in the Mahayana, it is believed that when one dies, there is a period, intermediate period, before the actual rebirth in the next realm. And some believe that it is 49 days, and other believe in different periods. In fact, we find that in the Mahayana, some masters think that the period is not definite. It all depends on when conditions are assembled for the consciousness to be reborn. Now, in the case of the Theravada teaching, because it is believed that as soon as one dies, one is going to be reborn. So that the conscious state is very important. It's going to be it's going to influence your state of birth then, when you're dying. So in that sense also you can see that this asana kamma is emphasized as a very important karma that ripens second only to the so-called garuka, the heavy karma. And so if somebody's mind, when he's dying, that is very interesting teaching, that useful even for psychology, for Buddhist psychology, what you can do, what you should do according to the teaching of Theravada Buddhism. And someone is dying. So one should try to influence the mind, the consciousness, try to help that person at the time of his or her passing away, and actually in Sri Lanka, for instance, it is practiced like this, and often the monk is sent to preach. The Dhamma reminds the person passing away about the teaching, and try to help the person to strengthen his or her faith in the Buddha and in the teaching, in the Sangha, and understands that that is not the end of it, but that is the beginning, and there's a chance for us to progress in future lives and so on. The monk preaches in such ways to the person passing away. It helps the person. The person feels relief that there is hope, and that he must be in a positive, in a skillful frame of mind. And sometimes, the statue or the picture of Buddha is shown to the person passing away. And then when the person sees that picture, the person feels calm and serene, and is reminded of all the faith he has had in the Buddha, in the teaching. So all these things help the persons for his rebirth state. And in a very, very important way. Conversely, if at the time of the person passing away, if his mind is confused, that's why you shouldn't confuse among the person. If his mind is confused, and if evil thought arises in the mind of the person, not only that by way of memory, but also what he does at that time. And just now, when I said that a person listens to a sermon, or a person sees a picture of Buddha, he's not just passive seeing, he participates mentally. His volition evolves, so he's creating karma. It's not just something passive, you see. And in fact, you have a similar kind of emphasis even in Tibetan Buddhism, you see. When somebody is dying, and the fellow practitioners kind of whisper into the, as it were, into the ears of the dying and say, you know, don't be afraid. You see, face up to the light, the white light, and be merged with reality. Because at the time of death, one is confused, and one, as it were, really literally cannot face reality. So one's consciousness merges with, you know, the dark color and in the wrong directions, and you'll be reborn. You miss the chance to be liberated. So you have to be reminded. According to the Buddhist tradition, actually, even in Sri Lanka or elsewhere, the faculty of hearing is still remaining, and it's quite sensitive, and the person needs to be reminded. That's one thing you can do. Very positive thing you can do. You can actually help. You know, that's why also in the Chinese tradition, you know, your people jolin. Your people go there, you know, to the person who had just passed away and chant Amitabha's name or chant sutta in a peaceful way. All these things help, and all these practices you can see agree quite well in the early teaching of the Buddha, or at least in the Theravada tradition. So as I say, conversely, if at that time a person thinks of something very evil or fearful, memory comes to him, frightening things, you know, and or he wants to do something bad at that time, hating somebody, and you know, and so on, and that the effect of the evil karma at that time is very strong. It will affect the way he's going to be reborn. So it's a very interesting, very useful teaching for us. So this is one type of karma that they describe. Other types, of course, I don't have to mention very much. And then also, in terms of the function, in terms of the kicca of the karma, there's also a classification. There are some karma that is strong enough to be responsible or to determine one's birth, you know, in the patisandhi moment, in the moment of relinquing. And then there's also, interestingly, there is also a type of karma that, although itself cannot do that kind of job, that is not strong enough to be a determinant of rebirth, to bring about a rebirth result, but it can support, it can help other karmas. You see, particularly importantly for us is the good karma, you see, to ripen. So it contributes in terms of modern Buddhism, you know, it contributes as a kind of adipati, a kind of a contributory factor. It itself cannot do the principal job of you know, bringing out ripening, but it helps other karma to ripen. Likewise, there are karmas that can obstruct, you see, other karmas. And sometimes some karma can even replace another karma, kind of take the place of the karma. So there are all kinds of karma like this, and even the karma can be so strong that it counteracts and effectively destroys the effect of an earlier, for instance, good karma. And if that is the case, then you can understand that likewise, evil action can be counteracted by a positive action. You see? So all this classification tells you at least one thing, that the teaching of karma in the process of development, you see, of the Theravada shows more clearly, inspired by the Nona Pala Sutta, that the teaching is not a mechanistic one, not a fully deterministic one, not a fatalistic one. And there are always hope, and you can counteract negative karma, you can promote positive karma. You have to learn to make use of this plasticity, flexibility of the working of karma. So to do that, you must be aware to understand the working of karma. When you come to the northern traditions, besides various types of classifications, there are a lot of very elaborate development doctrinals. As I said, there is no time for me to even discuss too much content. So one thing I want to, in keeping with what I've just said at the beginning, one thing I want to point out is about the teaching that karmas are not necessarily fixed in terms of ripening. They are not definite in terms of ripening. And again, when you look back to the Lona-Pala Sutta, you can see that inspiration is definitely already there, you see. So, in other words, some karmas are, if you like, determined or destined to arrive, others are not destined to arrive. But even then, the way, or whether indeed it can truly arise or not, also depends on conditions. We have seen that, for instance, in the Dhammajoti Sutta, the same evil, the same unskillful action done by two persons, exactly the same one, can be experienced in different ways. In one case, when the person's mind is not cultivated, there's no understanding, there's no wisdom, there's no ethical alignment, there's no equipoise, then the effect, even though the karma is not a very heavy one or very powerful one, the effect can be very strongly felt, and it can affect the person in a very bad way. On the other hand, if the person having done exactly the same karma, is that the person repents, the person cultivates mind and wisdom and so on, you see, and practiced the Dhamma, then the effect, not to say it's not experienced, but it can be experienced in such a way that the effect is so light that it's hardly discernible. And effectively, it's like as if it doesn't at all touch that person. So this teaching of the distinction between karmas that are definite or determinate in terms of ripening, karmas that are not, is very useful, very important for us. And a lot of discussions and arguments are found in the Northern Abhidhamma. One point in this connection that is explicit is that whether a karma will definitely ripen or not, right, also depends on various conditions, as I said. And one concept is whether there is an accumulation of the effect or not. That's a very important thing. So here in this connection, two terms are developed very elaborately in the Northern traditions, that karma that is done and karma that is accumulated. Do you know the Chinese? 一個係造作，一個叫增長。So karma, although has been done, does not necessarily become definite in terms of ripening. For it to be definite, to ripen, it has to be strengthened. It has to be accumulated. It's called, one is krita. The form done is krita. Accumulated is upachita. So krita, upachita, so job, samja. That concept are very articulately developed in the northern tradition. So you can see that in terms of doctrinal development, as I said, you find a lot more in the northern tradition. Before I proceed, let me tell you that in ancient time, for instance, when we look at the records in the great commentary, the Mahavibhasha, we find that there are some ancient masters who believe that actually all karmas can be transformed. There is no such thing as karma that are absolutely determinate in terms of ripening. Definitely have to be experienced. Well, that gives a lot of hope. And I'm referring here to a group of ancient masters called the Darshtantikas, They believe that no, all karmas, including, we just now refer to, we talk about the fivefold, most grievous of karma, like killing of father, mother, and so on. As a result of which one is destined to be reborn in hell. According to this group of ancient masters, no, even these karmas can be transformed. In a way that is consistent, with the Buddha's own position. I'm not necessarily saying the Buddha's position is so clearly in this way, stated in this way, but you can get inspiration in this direction if you want. Depends on how you understand the Dhamma, the Buddha's teaching. Because the Buddha says that what is karma is cetana, is a volition, and cetana is your inner mental state. Your volition can be transformed, your consciousness can be transformed. And when you transform the consciousness, then the effect also can be transformed. When you have transformed the karma also. You see? So these masters called the Darshtantikas, they strongly believe in this. In fact, for them always the mind is most important. That's why when they explain about the Noble Four Path, normally in traditional Buddhism, other Buddhist masters will say that the Noble Four Path consists of 8 parts, and in these 8 parts, the aspect that pertain to the body, aspect that pertain to the mind, aspect that pertain to meditation, to precepts, to livelihood. There are so many things. 8 aspects that you have to integrate, and you have to practice fully in order to end dukkha. But according to the Darshanika, they say the Noble Path actually consists of samatha and vipassana. That means meditations of calm and insight, the Ji-gun. So that means that the whole, what does it mean? It means the whole practice for liberation, for the ending of dukkha, nirodha dukkha, right? Is through the mind. Meditation in terms of samatha, vipassana means the cultivation of the integration of the mind and the insight from the mind, the insight of the mind. So when the mind is transformed, everything can be changed. So in a sense, there is no, you can say, there's no concept of the end of the ending of of the Dharma in a proper sense. There are conditions of degeneration, definitely, and the Buddha seemed to have at least indicated that. I don't believe the Buddha has taught really that that is the complete ending of the Dharma. But it's a complicated issue. Well, let's put it aside. But then certainly about the period of degeneration. That's clear, and we are witnessing it already. But then, if our experiences, human experiences, then largely depending on karma, and we can change our volitions, we can transform our mind, then everything is hopeful. So Buddhism, I would say, should be seen more as emphasizing that we can transform the world depending on our mind and understanding the laws of karma. So coming back to, I was saying that in the Northern teachings, when they discuss about this category of determinate karma and non-determinate karma, right? Referring to karmas that definitely have to ripen, and other types of karma that do not have to, are not definite in terms of ripening. Of course, the indefiniteness are in different senses. In terms of time, some karmas have to be experienced in this life. In this life, it's not fixed, and it in fact can be transformed to be experienced in the next life, or even the life after, and so on. You see, and some karmas to be experienced in the next life can in fact be experienced in this life. So there's indefiniteness, indeterminateness in terms of then time, also in terms of place, also location. And one whose karma is meant to, as it were, bring about rebirth in a good destiny, because of certain other karmas, certain other conditions, may end up being reborn in an inferior, lower destiny. And someone destined to be born in a lower destiny can, due to various other reasons, be reborn in a good destiny. So there are determinateness in various senses. The important concept that I referred to just now in this connection is, with regard to the two terms I've just given you, one is karma that has been done and karma that has been accumulated. Briefly speaking, if a karma is only done, has only been done but not accumulated, then it may not be definite in terms of ripening. For instance, if a karma, now of course I'm just speaking very briefly, more or less random, but there are very definite descriptions in the Abhidhamma Course of Bhashya, and those descriptions, definite, concise descriptions, also are based on the more lengthy description, more detailed description in the earlier text called the Mahavibhasha, the Great Commentary. But the main points there is that karma has only been done but not accumulated if it is not done out of a definite volition. If it is done casually, for example, then karma is done but it is not accumulated. That would mean that karma may not ripen. So we mustn't think that according to the Buddha's teaching, whenever you do a karma, you have to experience the effect. Or if a karma is meant to bring about a particular effect, you have to experience in that particular way. You see, we saw that in the Nona-Pala Sutta. This is not the case according to Buddha. So the important thing is about your volition. Whether you do it volitionally, whether definitely volition is involved or not. Then also karma is only done but not accumulated if there is no so-called retinue, accompaniment, was parivar. That means, it's just a technical term, it means that if there are no accompanying actions, karmas, that conduce to, that go along with the nature of the particular karma that you have done earlier. For instance, if you have done something good, you give some money, you give a donation, but you may have some good relation involved, but then maybe very light. So there is going to be some effect, but then after doing that, you see, you don't learn to rejoice in it. You don't learn to practice good. Understand, yeah, I'm doing a good action. That's going to benefit myself and others. I must do more. I must do in the same way. Let me do similar, generous actions. Let me practice kindness by my action of giving. If these accompaniments are not there and do not exist, then the action is not accumulated. It's not strengthened enough, and you may not get the effect. It doesn't mean that you donated 5 million, and then you're going to get, punya. You're going to get merit out of it for yourself. So that's what it meant by that. Conversely, if you have done, that's important, you have done some evil action, but you can repent. The emphasis of repentance is very explicit, very strong in this teaching of karma that developed in the Abhidhamma period onwards, and particularly in Mahayana Buddhism. If you can learn to repent sincerely, and you're honest about yourself, don't justify, don't rationalize. Well, I do like that because he deserves it. He is wrong, he is bad, I'm always good, I'm always right, And that kind of superiority complex must be overcome. You must be sincere and humble. Yeah, it's okay, I have not done something skillful, I've done something unskillful. It's common, but then I cannot rationalize. I cannot blame on others. Let me regret where possible, where necessary. It's not always easy to repent and regret, but where possible, let me do it, at least in my own heart. So if you learn to repent, and also not just repenting is not enough, and you learn to also do something good, something skillful that counteract it, then that karma, originally the evil karma, though it has been done, and definitely even volitionally done, but there are other karmas that counteract the effect, and therefore it may not ripen. So these teachings indicate very clearly that the karma doctrine of the Buddhist, since the Buddha time and through the developed Abhidhamma, clearly it's not a form of complete determinism, it's not a form of fatalism, and there's always hope. The important thing is to learn about the nature of karma, and sincerity, you can see the clear message is there. Sincerity and awareness and mindfulness must be maintained. Then there's always hope. And if you follow the Darshanika masters, in fact, every karma, any type of karma, can be transformed, can be translated. transcend. I think that's enough for today.